Plush Central's Panel of the People is brought to you by the Plush Central Government, a true democratic nation, for the people, of the people, and by the people.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Plush Central's Panel of the People. I am your head moderator, Lauren Swirls, here with my good friend Elie, as always. Please join us in welcoming today's set of panelists.
Our panelists today are Molly, our very own, Lady Bear, Gerald, and returning on our show, Wilbur. They're here to answer what could quite possibly be our most popular question. What is democracy?
Thanks for inviting me back on the show. I really appreciate it. As for the main topic of concern today, the term can mean something different to everyone depending on how it's viewed.
I think democracy is a civilized system of people run by the people who can vote for representatives. A democracy is supposed to respect and promote people's freedoms we sometimes take for granted.
It's an easy term to define, but I'm wondering why the people wanted us to define this question.
I think the people want to know everyone's thoughts on what a democracy is and what's supposed to be as we transform into what some call a pure democracy.
That term is new to me, Lauren. I'd also like to know where it leads us even further.
A so-called pure democracy doesn't have representatives, and yet we have nominated some from each of our cities. Perhaps we're just trying to make something new that we don't need to. We don't need to reinvent the wheel for sure, Wilbur. I think all of us are still trying to discover what exactly we're trying to be.
So let me see if I could wrap my head around what you just said, Wilbur. If Plush Central wants to be a pure democracy, then we don't need any representatives, and any one of us could be president. I think that's what the government wants, but there has to be a very specific criterion for being in charge of our nation.
If I may add this to our discussion, the United States government, the one we technically are under, is a two-party system of government. Citizens can elect representatives. So Plush Central wants no representatives and wants a one-party system. Is that correct?
If Plush Central wants a direct or pure democracy, then we need that. America's two-party system seems to be dividing their nation more than creating unity, like it's supposed to.
You make an excellent point, Wilbur. The government should work on bringing people together rather than dividing everyone.
Who says our political reform is doing more good than bad right now? There's always conflict in every situation. Some of us are in favor of this reform, but there are some of us who prefer that things stay just the way they are.
I mean, Gerald, there's obviously going to be conflict in every situation. What would this world be without it, right? Pretty dull world if you ask me.
Oh, it sure would be a dull world there, Lady Bear. Having a democracy changing is enough conflict on its own. I've said it before on this show, and I'll say it again. It could take years to completely reform our government the way we want it, and even then, there will always be new people in power that will see things differently. It's what will speak to the people, you know?
Or they'll say what we want to hear and never do anything to accomplish that they promise us.
This just got a bit heated. What do you mean by that, Molly?
I mean that if we're trying to become a pure democracy for the people, we should have a president or someone in charge that actually makes an effort to change things like President Merida did.
I think talking about our current president adds to our overall definition of democracy.
You beat me by 2 seconds, Wilbur.
I agree with everyone here when I say our president has been doing what most presidents we learn about don't. She does her job and makes the effort to listen to the people, rather than just say what we want to hear and then blow it off.
I mean, realistically, I'm sure every president does their best, but that's a whole nother conversation that's very heated. We'll save it for Thanksgiving.
Agreed. Everyone has their own opinions on how each president does their jobs.
So let me see if I have a consensus on our definition before we take our PSA break and dive further into our discussion on President Merida and a government driven by the people.
You basically just summed it up yourself in easier terms, Lauren. A government that depends on the way of the people.
That's the way I wish they put it in my classes growing up in school. The topic of government and politics would make a little more sense that way.
You're just waiting for someone to barge in, aren't you, Lauren?
Yes, of course now that I expect it, no one comes and bugs us. Maybe they get the hint.
Our show is kind of like a democracy if we think about it. This show is people-driven and government-funded.
I do see similarities there, Elie. Perhaps our show is supposed to teach other forms of government how to act and behave.
Behave? When have we ever known to do that?
Oh, looks like it's time to take our PSA break. We'll be right back to our discussion after these words from our sponsors. Gee, I've got to get some more of that pumpkin spice if I'm going to stay awake.
Hello, everyone. Have you been involved in a car accident? Is somebody suing you? I am Mr. Goodbear. You can call me Mr. Bear. Actually, no, that is confusing. There already is a Mr. Bear. He's a representative. I'm sorry. Just call me Mr. Goodbear. And I can help you get the justice you deserve. Call me, Mr. Goodbear, at 222-222-222. Yeah, it's an easy number. I don't care. You just know how to contact me, okay? I can help you win the justice you deserve. If anybody has a lawsuit against you, I can fix that. I'm a pretty good lawyer, you know. Just call me Mr. Goodbear, and I'll give you the justice you deserve. I really gotta think of a better commercial than this.
Hi there, I'm Strawberry Poppy, Bearville's House Speaker. Are you guys in favor of this new democratic political reform? If you are, please don't be afraid to tell us. In Plus Central's Panel of the People, you can tell us on the show. You can tell us in the email box. You can even write to us at the Plus Central Government, right here in this address below. I am Strawberry Poppy, and I am fighting for this pure democracy. If you don't think it's doing us any good, please tell us why as well. We always like to know what other people are thinking, and it's important to have your voices heard. If you don't vote, then we can't have your voice be heard. Everybody's voice should be heard, and I am a firm believer of that. And so if you continue to elect me as your House Speaker, I, Strawberry Poppy, can make everybody's voices heard. I guarantee it.
Welcome back to this interesting episode of Plush Central's Panel of the People.
We left off with everyone trying to sum up our definition of democracy by talking about what our current president has done.
President Merida is the image of what a democratic leader should be. She's interested in the voices of the people that elected her, and even looks at every side of the argument.
Not every president will be everybody's favorite. However, President Merida speaks to add and for the people. President Merida speaks for the people, to and for the people. She'll do anything in her power to keep us safe and make a vast majority happy. Before we had her, we had ruthless leaders who only cared about the money that they have and wanted to repeat our history we swore to stay away from.
Plus Central was becoming more of a dictatorship under former President Teddy's word, than a democracy, even though that's what he told us we would become.
We were certainly steering ourselves away from a democracy under our past presidents. Us talking about this topic on the show could help our future leaders finish what President Merida has started.
So far, we have 2 leaders running and promising that they would finish the reform. Not to be hasty, but I think we'll have at least 5 more presidents before we surely reach our common ground.
I'm sure it'll be worth it in the end.
If I may continue to talk about our former president, most of us elected him, and he did some things the majority of people wanted, or at least thought would benefit us.
Our transition to a pure democracy would let anyone in charge, right?
I think what Plus Central wants to do is develop a new criterion for how we elect our leaders, since our government is run by us, after all.
It does seem like that's what they're trying to do.
It seems like perhaps we should define a line between having a balance of power and not having too much of it, you know?
I agree with you, Elie. Our news should be better at checking and balancing our political power. Perhaps if it falls into the wrong hands. As well, we need to be educated on our rights that we have and decide how much we actually really need.
It's a good point. I feel like the government shouldn't give us too much power, because that would be complete chaos. Perhaps we can look into that when we vote for our representatives.
There comes a fine line between equality and having too much power. I mean, yes, a democracy is power of the people in a sense, but we can also define what kinds of power we need versus what powers a more experienced politicians need.
Sorry to cut you off, Wilbur, but we have to cut our programming short for the government.
What do you mean cut our programming for the day? We're funded by the government. Since when do they want us to stop?
They told me that President Merida has a speech coming up soon. She hasn't given a speech in over a year, though.
First I'm hearing about this.
Well, looks like we're out of time. Figures. We can't have one show without being interrupted even by our own crew.
Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Plush Central's Panel of the People. If you'd like to continue this conversation, please feel free to let us know in our conversation box and on our social media web pages.
I'd also like to thank our panelists for coming on the show today. I apologize that we had to cut our conversation short. These kind of things just seem to happen on Plush Central Studios.